My sister married my high school bully who destroyed my life, and now she wants me to forgive him and be their child's godparent after he exposed my past trauma to my parents. I never thought I'd be back here, writing this, but sometimes life takes a twisted turn. So, a little backstory. I'm 29F, and my sister Emily, 31F, just married my worst nightmare. And when I say nightmare, I mean it literally. His name is Max, and he made my life hell in high school. The kind of guy who turned every day into a struggle just to get through. In high school, Max was popular, charming, and downright evil. He was one of those guys who got off on other people's misery. I was shy, quiet, and unfortunately, his favorite target. If it wasn't the constant name-calling, it was the pranks, like dumping milk on my locker books or tripping me up in front of a crowd. One time, he even shared something personal I'd written to my counselor about the anxiety I was dealing with. He plastered it all over the school, making me a complete joke. After high school, I moved out of town, and as far as I was concerned, I'd never have to think about Max again. But then, 2 years ago, Emily started dating him. I was horrified when she first told me, but I didn't realize just how serious they were. I thought it was a phase, that she'd come to her senses. But then, last month, I got the call. They were engaged, and she wanted me to come to the wedding. I had no interest in going. I avoided her calls, letting them roll to voicemail, hoping she'd take the hint. But then our parents got involved. They didn't just ask, they insisted. They bought into this whole idea that Max had changed and that everyone deserves a second chance. They kept saying he was a different person now, that he'd grown up. Mom actually had the audacity to tell me I'd be holding on to the past if I didn't at least try to move on. I felt like I was trapped. It's like they didn't care about the hell he put me through. To them, I was just being difficult, like I was being dramatic for not wanting to relive the trauma he caused. Emily called me too, asking me to meet them for dinner. Just one dinner, she said. You don't have to like him, but please give him a chance. Against every instinct, I agreed. Maybe part of me hoped he really had changed. I thought I'd just go, sit through it, and be done with it. So last Friday night, I found myself walking into the restaurant, dreading every step. When I got there, Emily was all smiles. She hugged me, gushed about how glad she was that I came, and introduced me to Max like it was any other introduction. He acted all friendly, with this fake, nervous grin plastered on his face, like we were just acquaintances meeting for the first time. I wanted to leave right then and there, but I stayed, mostly for Emily's sake. I figured if I could just get through one night, maybe she'd back off. As we sat down, I was quiet, hoping to get through the night with minimal conversation. But it didn't take long for Max to bring up the past. I know I was rough on you in high school, he said, as if that covered it. He gave this half-hearted apology, saying how he was just a kid back then, and didn't know any better. Emily looked at me with these hopeful eyes like she was expecting me to just forgive him on the spot. I wanted to scream, "Rough on you." That didn't even begin to cover what he did. But I held back. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I just nodded and muttered something about moving on. But then he kept going. He started sharing stories about me about high school, like they were some kind of shared joke. At one point, he actually laughed about how I used to hide in the bathrooms, too scared to walk down the hall. Emily laughed along, clearly uncomfortable, but not enough to stop him. I couldn't take it anymore. I told him he had no right to talk about my life like that, not after everything he did. And then, with Emily's eyes wide with shock, I got up and left. I felt humiliated, like I was that scared, bullied kid all over again. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd walk away, and that would be that. But of course, it wasn't. The next day, I got a call from my mom. She'd heard all about the incident from Emily, and she was furious with me. Apparently, Max had gone home and told her and my dad everything. But here's the kicker. He twisted the story. He told them he was just trying to reminisce and that I've flown off the handle for no reason. Now my parents think I'm being immature, holding on to childish grudges. And to make matters worse, they're mad at me for ruining Emily's engagement celebration. But the real slap in the face came when Emily called, crying, begging me to let it go. She said Max had opened up to her about his regret over how he treated me and that I should be the bigger person. I felt sick to my stomach. She said they were planning to have kids, and they wanted me to be a part of their lives, starting with me agreeing to be their first child's godparent. I thought it was a joke, but she was dead serious. My own sister, the one person I thought I could rely on, was asking me to forgive the man who had single-handedly turned my teenage years into a waking nightmare. She wanted me to embrace him, to be there for their child like none of it had ever happened. And when I told her I couldn't do it, that I'd never be able to forgive him for the things he did, she actually had the nerve to say I was overreacting, that I was letting the past control my future. Now, my entire family is breathing down my neck, telling me to let go, to be happy for Emily, to be a part of this new chapter in our lives. I feel like I'm going insane. They've all bought into this new Max act, and no one seems to care about what he put me through. I keep wondering if I'm the one who's in the wrong, if maybe I'm just being too sensitive. But then I remember all those days, all those nights I spent crying myself to sleep, wondering why I was never good enough to just be left alone. So here I am, alone, torn between my family and my own sanity. They want me to forgive and forget, to play happy family with the man who destroyed my life. And every time I think about giving in, I feel like I'm betraying myself all over again. After that dinner, I thought things couldn't get any worse, but life has a funny way of proving you wrong. It's been about a week since I walked out on Max and Emily, and the fallout has been unreal. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that my parents took their side. They've always put Emily on a pedestal, and somehow she can do no wrong. But it still hurts to know that they're so willing to dismiss my pain just to keep the peace. I mean, don't I deserve at least a little support from my own family? My mom called me again 2 days after the dinner. She started off calm, asking if I'd thought any more about what Emily and Max had said. I could tell she was trying to be understanding, but it was like she didn't really hear anything I said. Every time I tried to explain how Max's bullying had affected me, she just brushed it off. She kept saying things like, "That was so long ago, and you can't hold on to grudges forever." When I tried to tell her about the specific things Max did, she just sighed and told me I was exaggerating. She actually had the nerve to say, "You're a grown woman now. Shouldn't you be able to let go of some silly high school drama?" I nearly laughed out loud at the absurdity of it. How do I even begin to explain to someone like her that what happened wasn't just drama? It was trauma. But of course, in her eyes, it's all my fault for not being stronger or more forgiving. Then she hit me with the big guns. "Emily's worried about you, she said. "She's afraid you're going to isolate yourself from the family over something that should be water under the bridge." I could hear the guilt trip a mile away, but it still got to me. I don't want to be isolated. I don't want to be the person who can't get along with her own family. But what am I supposed to do when they're asking me to ignore the past and pretend that everything is fine? My dad called me the next day. He's usually the quieter one, but when he speaks up, it's with this unyielding authority that's hard to argue with. He told me I needed to apologize to Max. Yes, you read that right. He wants me to apologize to Max, the same guy who tormented me through some of the hardest years of my life. According to my dad, I was disrespectful by walking out, and I'm the one who caused a scene. He said I needed to show some maturity and make amends for Emily's sake. Apparently, I'm supposed to put aside my own feelings and prioritize my sister's happiness. I felt like I was going insane. It's like they've all forgotten who Max is, what he did to me. And when I tried to stand up for myself, my dad just talked over me. He said, "People change, and if you can't accept that, then you're the one who's going to end up alone." Those words hit me hard. I hung up feeling like maybe he was right, like maybe I really am the one who's being unreasonable. But deep down, I know I can't just sweep all this under the rug. I can't ignore the scars Max left on my life just because it's inconvenient for everyone else. A couple of days later, Emily showed up at my apartment. I wasn't exactly in the mood to talk to her, but she just waltzed in like everything was fine. She sat down on my couch, crossed her legs, and said, "Look, I know you're upset, but you're blowing this way out of proportion." She kept going on about how Max had changed and how he was trying so hard to make things right. She said that he'd confessed to her about all the horrible things he did to me and that he was filled with regret. Funny, because he sure didn't seem that regretful when he was bringing up my past at dinner like it was a joke. Emily then told me that Max was hurt by the way I left. She said he'd been really vulnerable lately, opening up to her about his own past struggles, and that he felt terrible about what happened in high school. She actually had the nerve to say, "He's healing too, as if my trauma and his supposed regret are somehow on equal footing. I asked her if she even cared about what I went through, and she just sighed, saying, "I do care, but you have to admit you're making it hard for us all to move forward." I told her that moving forward doesn't mean I have to forgive him. I explained, probably for the 100th time, that Max destroyed my sense of safety and self-worth. I told her about the nights I spent crying, the anxiety attacks, the years of therapy I had to go through just to feel remotely normal. But she just looked at me with that blank stare, like she was waiting for me to stop talking so she could get to her next point. Then, she hit me with the real reason she came over. She wanted me to consider becoming the godparent to their future child. She said, "You're my sister, and I want you to be part of my family, our family." She went on about how important it was for her child to have a positive, strong role model and how much it would mean to her if I took on that role. She said it would be a healing experience for both me and Max, a way to move on and build something beautiful from the pain. I couldn't believe it. She was actually asking me to be a godparent to the child of the man who had wrecked my teenage years, the man who she knows drove me to my breaking point. It felt like she was asking me to erase the past, to pretend like it never happened. I told her I needed time to think about it, which wasn't a lie. I really did need time to process the audacity of what she was asking. After she left, I sat alone, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. How did we get here? How did my own sister end up with someone like Max? And why does she expect me to just get over it? I feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare where everyone but me is blind to the truth. They've all convinced themselves that Max is a changed man, that he's somehow redeemed, and that I'm the one holding on to the past. But I can't shake the feeling that this is all just some sick game to him, that he hasn't changed at all, and that he's still the same cruel person who once took pleasure in making my life miserable. But now, I'm faced with an impossible choice. Do I swallow my pride, my pain, and pretend to forgive him for the sake of my family? Or do I stand my ground, knowing that it could mean losing my sister forever? Part of me wants to just run, to cut them all off and build a new life somewhere far away from this toxic mess. But another part of me can't let go of the hope that they'll finally see things from my perspective, that they'll understand the damage Max has done. For now, I'm stuck in this horrible limbo, waiting, wondering, and hoping that I can somehow find a way to reclaim my life without sacrificing my sanity. But I know one thing for sure. I won't let Max manipulate me the way he did back then. I've come too far to let him tear me down again. It's been a couple of weeks since Emily's visit, and honestly, things have only gotten worse. I thought I could take some time to think things through, but it turns out my family has zero patience. I've been getting nonstop calls and texts from my parents, each one more aggressive than the last. I guess they thought if they kept hounding me, I'd eventually cave and see reason. Joke's on them though, because the more they push, the more resolved I feel. I can't believe how blind they are, how willing they are to ignore everything just to make things easier for Emily and Max. My dad left a voicemail last night, saying he was disappointed in me for not accepting the godparent role. He told me I was being selfish, that I was tearing the family apart. I've played that message over and over again, trying to understand how I became the villain in my own story. It's like they've rewritten history, turned Max into some tragic hero who's trying to make amends, while I'm the stubborn antagonist clinging to ancient grudges. I want to scream at them, shake them, make them understand that this isn't just about a high school bully. This is about the fact that he's still manipulating my life, still getting his way. Emily, of course, has been no better. She showed up at my apartment again, this time with a determined look in her eyes, like she was here on some self-righteous mission. She didn't even wait for me to invite her in. She just pushed past me and started pacing around like she was building up to something big. And then, she dropped the bomb. "Mark and I are renewing our vows," she said, stopping in front of me with this weird, defiant look on her face. "We want you to be there, and I want you to make peace with Max before the ceremony. This is non-negotiable." I stared at her, stunned. I asked her why she thought this was something she could demand of me. She rolled her eyes and launched into this whole speech about how I was tearing the family apart, how my refusal to move on was causing a rift between us. She actually said, "If you can't forgive Max, then maybe you don't belong at the ceremony at all. I need people there who support my happiness." Support her happiness. I wanted to scream. How could she say that to me with a straight face? How could she expect me to just forget the years of torment, the sleepless nights, the endless anxiety, How could she expect me to forgive someone who used my darkest moments as entertainment, someone who had never shown an ounce of remorse until it became convenient for him? I told her as much, and she just shook her head, like I was some naive child who didn't understand the complexities of adult relationships. He's changed, she insisted, and he regrets what he did. But you haven't changed at all. You're still stuck in the past, still letting it control you. If you don't find a way to let go, you're going to end up alone, and I don't want that for you. Alone? That word stung more than I'd like to admit. Maybe it's because deep down, I know she's right. I have isolated myself over the years, built walls to protect myself from anyone who might hurt me. But is that such a terrible thing? I've had to protect myself, to put myself first for once, because nobody else has ever had my back. Not my parents, not Emily. I tried explaining this to her, tried making her see that this isn't just about Max, that it's about years of feeling like I don't belong in my own family. But she just brushed me off, saying I was playing the victim again. When I told her I wasn't going to the ceremony, she got this icy look on her face. She said, "If you can't do this for me, then maybe you're not the sister I thought you were. I'm giving you until the end of the week to change your mind. If you're not willing to support me, then don't bother showing up." And with that, she walked out, leaving me standing there, shaking with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. I couldn't believe the ultimatum she'd just given me. In her mind, I'm the one who's tearing the family apart. I'm the one who's wrong for refusing to forgive. And Max, he gets to play the role of the reformed man, the tragic figure who's just trying to make amends. It's like a sick joke, and I'm the only one who sees the punchline. I spent the next few days in a daze, barely able to function. It's like my entire world is crashing down around me, and no one even cares. My own family is willing to turn their backs on me just to keep the peace, to maintain the illusion that we're all one big happy family. I tried talking to my mom again, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd understand. But as soon as I brought up how hurtful Emily's ultimatum was, she cut me off. "Your sister is just trying to build a life for herself," she said, like that justified everything. "You need to stop being so dramatic and start acting like an adult. People forgive each other all the time. Why can't you? Why can't I? Because every time I think about Max, I feel I'm 16 again, helpless and terrified, with no one to turn to. Because every time I hear his name, I remember the way he used to laugh as he tormented me, the way he turned my pain into a joke. Because forgiving him would mean pretending that none of it mattered, that it was all just a childish mistake. And I can't do that. I won't. But here I am, stuck between two impossible choices. Do I swallow my pride, betray my own feelings, and go to this ridiculous ceremony just to make my family happy? Or do I stand my ground, knowing full well that it could mean losing them forever? I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare with no way out. I've been pacing my apartment for hours, trying to find a solution, but every path seems to lead to more pain. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I got another message from Emily. This time, she wasn't playing nice. She said that if I didn't show up at the ceremony, she would tell our parents about my past struggles, the things I'd confided in her years ago. She said she'd help them understand why I'm so bitter, why I can't let go. It was a threat, plain and simple, a way to force me into submission. Now I'm at a loss. I feel like I'm being blackmailed by my own sister, manipulated into doing something that goes against everything I believe. I'm angry, I'm hurt, and I'm scared. I've never felt more alone in my entire life. I want to believe that I can stand up to them, that I can refuse to play their game. But I also know that if I walk away, I'll be severing the last ties I have to my family. So here I am, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet because I have nowhere else to turn. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can find the strength to keep fighting, or if I should just give in and go along with their charade. All I know is that I can't keep living like this, caught between loyalty to a family that's never shown me loyalty in return, and the desperate need to protect myself from the people who've hurt me the most. I don't know what my next move will be. I'm hoping that maybe somehow I'll find a way to make peace with all of this. But for now, I'm just trying to survive, one day at a time, hoping that maybe someday I'll find a way to heal from the scars my family has left on my heart. So here I am, standing on the precipice of losing my entire family, wondering how things got so out of hand. After Emily's latest message, I felt completely numb. It was like my sister had taken everything I had left, my trust, my privacy, my dignity, and shredded it just to get her way. I had tried to keep some semblance of peace, tried to hold on to the idea that we could still be a family despite everything. But now, it feels like I'm standing alone in a war zone. I'm not just fighting Max anymore. I'm fighting my own blood. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and dread. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced. I didn't know what Emily would pull next or if my parents would call with yet another lecture about forgiveness. I was exhausted. Physically, emotionally, mentally. I found myself just lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell my life ended up like this. I'd always known my family had its issues, but this level of betrayal was something I never could have anticipated. Eventually, I realized that waiting around for Emily's next move was slowly killing me, so I decided to take control. I figured if I was going to lose them all anyway, I might as well have one last honest conversation and get everything out in the open. I called my parents and told them I wanted to come over to finally talk face to face about everything. When I got to their house, I was greeted by a cold silence. My parents were sitting together on the couch, their expressions tense. It felt like I was walking into an intervention, only this time, I was the one on trial. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, and sat across from them. For a few agonizing moments, none of us spoke. Then, my mom broke the silence. "Why are you doing this to us?" she asked, her voice tinged with sadness. "Why can't you just let go and be happy for your sister?" I could feel the familiar anger bubbling up inside me, but I held it back, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not doing this to you, Mom. This isn't about you or even about Emily. It's about Max. I've told you what he did to me, and I can't just ignore it. I can't pretend it didn't happen." My dad sighed, rubbing his temples like he was dealing with a stubborn child. "People change, you know. Maybe he was a terrible person back then, but he's a husband and soon-to-be father now. Don't you think he deserves a chance to prove himself?" I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow even to my own ears. If he's really changed, then why did he use my trauma against me? Why did he think it was okay to expose my past to you like that? Does that sound like someone who's changed? They exchanged glances, a flicker of doubt passing between them. But then my mom shook her head, as if she was trying to shake off my words like they were nothing more than a nuisance. "Look, we're not saying what he did was right, but everyone makes mistakes. Holding on to this grudge isn't healthy. It's poisoning you, and it's tearing this family apart." "That's not fair," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "You're asking me to forgive someone who has shown me nothing but cruelty. You're asking me to act like everything's fine just so we can all play happy family. But I can't do that. I won't." At this point, my mom's face twisted with anger. "You're so selfish. You're making this all about you when it's really about supporting your sister. You can't even see how much you're hurting her." I was stunned. Selfish. They were calling me selfish. I was the one who had endured years of torment, the one who was still dealing with the scars Max had left behind. And yet somehow, in their twisted view, I was the villain here. It was like they had rewritten the narrative to make themselves feel better, to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth of what Max had done. I took a deep breath, trying to control the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "You want to talk about selfish? What about Emily? She's willing to drag me through hell just to satisfy Max, just to make her life easier. And you're enabling her. You're so focused on keeping the peace that you're willing to sacrifice me. How is that not selfish?" My dad leaned forward, his face hard. "You've always been so dramatic, so quick to play the victim. You don't think we had tough times growing up? You don't think we had to make sacrifices? Life isn't always fair, and sometimes you have to move on, even if it hurts." I could feel tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "I'm not asking for a perfect life. I'm asking for respect. I'm asking you to acknowledge that what happened to me was real, that it mattered. But all I'm getting from you is excuses and accusations." They fell silent, their expressions unreadable. I could see the walls closing in, the unspoken decision that they had already made. I realized then that nothing I said would ever be enough. They had chosen their side, and I was a collateral damage. The family peace they wanted so badly came at the cost of my dignity, my mental health, my very sense of self-worth. After a long, tense pause, my mom finally spoke. "We're not going to change our minds. Emily and Max need you, and if you can't find it in your heart to support them, then maybe you should just stay away. We'll get by without you." Her words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur. I stood up, forcing myself to stay calm even though I was shaking with rage and heartbreak. "Fine. If that's what you want, then I'll stay away. But don't expect me to come back when things fall apart. Don't expect me to keep playing the role of the scapegoat just so you can avoid facing the truth." They didn't say anything as I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I felt numb, hollow, like I had just lost everything that ever mattered. I knew I had made the right decision, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. My own family had chosen to side with the man who had destroyed my life, and they had discarded me like I was nothing. On the drive home, my mind was a chaotic mess. I replayed the conversation over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at the universe for dealing me such a cruel hand. But instead, I just kept driving, the empty road stretching out before me like an endless, lonely path. I felt like I was disappearing, like the person I used to be was fading into the void, leaving behind only the broken fragments of a life I no longer recognized. When I finally got back to my apartment, I collapsed on the floor, letting the tears I had held back spill over. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. My family, the people who were supposed to stand by me no matter what, had abandoned me. I felt like a stranger in my own life, a ghost haunting the remnants of a shattered past. But as the tears slowed and the numbness set in, a new feeling began to emerge, a fierce, defiant anger. I realized that I didn't need them. I had survived Max's cruelty once, and I could survive this too. If they wanted to cut me out, then so be it. I would find my own way, build my own life free from the toxic chains of a family that had never truly loved me. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would rise above this. I would rebuild, piece by piece, until I was stronger than ever. I would find people who valued me, who respected me, who loved me for who I was. I would create a new family, one that couldn't be destroyed by the likes of Max or anyone else. They had taken everything from me, but they hadn't broken me. Not yet. And as long as I had that fire burning inside me, they never would. I didn't think life could go on after that conversation. I didn't know how I could wake up each day and continue without the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But the morning after I left my parents' house, something shifted. As much as I wanted to curl up in bed and let the world disappear, I realized I had a choice. I could either let this destroy me, or I could use it as fuel to build something new. That day, I began the process of reclaiming my life. I started small. I unfollowed Emily and my parents on social media, removed them from my phone contacts, and deleted every message thread and photo that connected me to that part of my past. The physical act of erasing them from my digital life felt surprisingly freeing, like I was clearing out space for something better. I knew it wasn't a cure-all, but it was a start. One of the first things I did was reconnect with friends I'd drifted away from over the years. I met up with Sarah, my best friend from college, and we spent hours talking over coffee, catching up on all the things we'd missed. She listened to me vent, offering comfort and validation in a way I hadn't realized I'd needed. I told her everything, about Max, about Emily, about my family's betrayal, and instead of judgment, I found genuine empathy. For the first time, I felt like someone was truly on my side. Sarah encouraged me to join a support group for people who had experienced toxic family dynamics, and while I was hesitant at first, I went. Sitting in that circle, surrounded by strangers who had faced similar betrayals, I realized that I wasn't as alone as I had felt. Each person there had their own story, their own pain, and yet they were surviving. They were healing. Their resilience became my inspiration, a reminder that I could rebuild, that I could create a life that wasn't defined by the people who had hurt me. One evening after a particularly intense group session, I decided it was time to confront my trauma head-on. I'd spent years pushing it down, pretending it didn't affect me, but I couldn't hide from it anymore. I booked an appointment with a therapist who specialized in trauma and abuse recovery. Our sessions were grueling, each one peeling back layers of pain I'd buried long ago. But I could feel myself growing stronger with each step, reclaiming parts of myself that Max had tried to take away. In therapy, I began to unpack not only what Max had done to me, but also the years of gaslighting and manipulation I'd endured from my family. I learned to recognize the toxic patterns, to understand that I wasn't to blame for the choices they'd made. I started to see that their betrayal was a reflection of their own failings, not mine. The more I dug into my past, the more I realized that I had been carrying their shame for far too long. It was time to let it go. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed something incredible happening. I was changing. The anger and bitterness that had once consumed me were fading, replaced by a quiet, unshakable strength. I was no longer defined by what Max had done to me or by the ways my family had failed me. I was rebuilding, reclaiming my identity, finding a version of myself that was stronger and more resilient than I'd ever known. During this time, Emily continued to reach out occasionally, leaving voicemail messages that I refused to listen to. My parents sent a few emails, each one a variation on the same theme. Why can't you just let go and move on? But I had already let go of them. I didn't owe them my forgiveness. I didn't owe them my pain, my peace, my mental health. They had made their choices, and now I was making mine. Then, one day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I picked up, and to my shock, it was Max. He sounded different, almost defeated, and he started talking about how he wanted to apologize, how he had come to realize the pain he had caused me. I could tell by his tone that something was different. Maybe he'd finally been forced to confront his own demons, or maybe he just realized that his actions had real consequences. But I stopped him mid-apology, cutting him off before he could even get started. I told him that his words meant nothing to me, that I didn't need or want his apology. I told him that I had already moved on, that I had built a life for myself that had nothing to do with him or his influence. I told him I was done allowing him to take up space in my mind, that he no longer had any power over me. And with that, I hung up, feeling a sense of closure that I hadn't thought possible. After that call, I realized that I had finally reached the end of this journey. I had confronted my past, faced my fears, and reclaimed my life. I had found people who valued me, who respected me, who saw me for who I truly was. I had built a new family, one that wasn't bound by blood but by love, loyalty, and mutual support. A few weeks later, Sarah invited me to a get-together with some of her friends, and I found myself laughing and genuinely enjoying the company of people who accepted me without judgment. I felt lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew that my journey wasn't over, that I would always carry the scars of my past, but I also knew that I had the strength to face whatever came next. As I drove home that night, I thought back to where I had been just a few months ago, broken, betrayed, alone. And now, here I was, a new person, someone who had not only survived but thrived. I had taken the ashes of my old life and used them to build something beautiful, something that was truly mine. So here's my message to anyone reading this who has been hurt by the people who were supposed to love them. You are stronger than you think. You have the power to reclaim your life, to rebuild from the wreckage, to create a future that is entirely your own. Don't let anyone take that from you. Don't let anyone convince you that you aren't worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Because if I can do it, so can you.